MPs are here tonight to debate what the best way to help you tackle with the cost of living is. Rachel Bendayan is the Parliamentary Secretary to the Associate Minister of Finance. Stephanie Kusie is the Conservatives' Treasury Board critic, and Peter Julian is the NDP's Deputy Finance critic. Hello, all three of you. Good to see you here in studio. Ms. Bendayan, I'm going to start with you. I would like to ask you to be unequivocal if you could. Is there no broad-based support coming from the federal government to help Canadians who are struggling with the cost of living right now?
There is. Yesterday, we received royal assent for the first measure that we introduced when we came back from the summer break, and that was to double the GST credit, and that's going to help 11 million households across the country. Really happy that we're going to be able to get that support out quickly. Canadians can start getting those direct deposits as early as beginning of November. And we had hoped to pass swiftly some measures in order to help Canadians that have low income with their rent and with dental care, as we promised to do for children under 12. But that is being delayed in the House, unfortunately, by the Conservatives. But we're hoping to get that support out quickly. And we know that Canadians are hurting. I mean, I went grocery shopping on the weekend and I see that the prices are rising, which is why we want to be there, why we want to support in particular the Canadians that are having the hardest time at the moment. And I frankly find it really frustrating. I heard Pierre Poilievre criticize the size of the checks that we're proposing to give to low-income renters. He's saying $500 is, I don't even know what he's saying. He's saying $500 is not going to help. Is $0 going to help? Because there are no ideas coming forward from Pierre, just criticism about what we're proposing.
Well, look, we'll let your Conservative colleague weigh in a second on that, but respectfully, my question was actually around whether or not there would be broad-based support. And by that, I mean, I'll fine-tune the question, not just targeted to low-income Canadians, who certainly are hurting the most from the rate of inflation right now, but the rest of Canada, which is also hurting a lot from grocery prices, as we spelled out. Canada is really an outlier right now, the only G7 government that has not proposed some type of broad-based support for people hurting.
Well, our Canada Child benefit and many of our other benefits are indexed to inflation.
That's indexed to inflation last year, so that's about 2.4%. That's not anywhere near the increase in the cost of living people are paying for right now. Can you be unequivocal? Is the government not planning at any time to increase the scope of the help it's offering Canadians?
Of course, I would never say unequivocally that we would not consider such a measure. I mean, we are literally, I wake up every morning, as does the finance minister, looking at the inflation numbers, and we reevaluate things every single day. And so absolutely, we're going to take a look at what is needed. But right now, what we're seeing here in Canada is the third consecutive month of a decrease in inflation. We were at 8.1%. We're now at 6.9%, while other countries, including the UK, continue to move up. And so we need to monitor the situation, see if inflation will continue to decrease as it has been, or stabilize. And there's certainly nothing off of the table, Vashi.
Okay, Ms. Kusie, I want to pick up on the point that Ms. Bendayan was making earlier and ask how your party can say the government needs to do more to help Canadians who are struggling and then oppose an extra $500 for people who can't afford rent.
The problem, Vashi, is inflationary spending. With these two bills, we are now at, in budget 2022, a new total of $56.5 billion of spending. And this absolutely has to stop. We have to see some relief, and that starts with taxes. And as our leader has said, under a Conservative government, there will be no new taxes. For every dollar of spending that we propose, we will find a dollar of savings. And really, that's where the relief starts, Vashi, is with the stop of inflationary spending, because between the coalition of the NDP and the Liberal government, they're driving Canadians and Canadian families into the ground with this inflationary spending.
So the thing is, if spending is inflationary because it adds to demand in the economy, because people have more money to spend, so are tax cuts. And that's essentially what your party, is proposing. I spoke to the parliamentary budget officer last week who said, yes, under certain circumstances, the proposals that your party have put forward around freezing the carbon tax increase, for example, around not increasing premiums for EI and CPP, could be inflationary as well.
Vashi, you pointed out yourself, other nations have taken steps in an effort to reduce inflationary spending. There are 51 other nations around the world that have cut taxes. Half of those, two-thirds of those are G7 and G20 nations, and two-thirds of those are OECD nations. So this government, the coalition...
Respectfully, though, which of those countries has seen the rate of inflation decrease as a result?
We definitely have to start with reducing inflationary spending. And as I said, there is an increase of the $56.5 billion in budget 2022 with Bill C-30 and C-31, which my Liberal colleague mentioned. And $500 in rent relief certainly won't do a lot for Canadian families that are struggling. And it's very well known that all provinces, except for Manitoba, across the country have dental programs for children. So this is additional spending with very little relief for families, Vashi.
I do take your point about inflationary spending, and I'm not saying it's wrong. I'm just saying that the counter is also that tax cuts can be inflationary, and all the relief that's been provided has not necessarily, it may have helped certain segments of the population in those countries. It certainly has not reduced the overall inflation rate in many of the countries you point to, but we'll pick that point up in a second because I want to get Mr. Julian in. And specifically, your party is critical of the Bank of Canada's focus on hiking interest rates, or the focus more largely, I should say, maybe not the bank's particular, the focus more largely that it is the bank's job to hike interest rates in order to curb inflation. I hear your leader oppose that. What other mechanism is available to actually reduce inflation then?
Well, first off, it's interesting the Liberals didn't give credit where credit is due. Jagmeet Singh and the NDP pushed for the doubling of the GST rebate. We included as part of our confidence and supply agreement forcing the Liberals to put out the money that would support dental care for kids 12 and under and ensuring the rental supplement. These are all things that the NDP has achieved. What Jagmeet Singh was critical about was the idea that wages should not increase, and that's the reality. When we look at the inflation figures, wages are falling further and further behind. The other issue, of course, is that food prices have skyrocketed far beyond the inflation rate, and that's where the NDP brought the motion that was voted on Monday, voted unanimously. The Conservatives and Liberals finally realized the good sense and wisdom of the NDP approach of cracking down on greedflation, where the food prices have gone far beyond the inflation rate or even the increase in supply costs. What has basically been happening is price gouging, and Loblaws and Metro implicitly acknowledged that by saying that they were going to freeze their prices from now on. So these are the kinds of issues that the NDP has brought to the floor of the House of Commons. We've said the Competition Bureau needs to be brought to bear on this greedflation and how companies are gouging Canadian families. And we've also said that new legislation needs to be brought in to ensure that we don't see these unjustified price rises. And all other MPs agreed. So hopefully the government will take action on the motion that was passed on Monday.
I just want to be clear, though, grocery prices are not the only driver of inflation. There's a lot more to it. And I am confused by what your leader is saying. Is the primary role not the Bank of Canada's to rein in inflation, or do you see there's some other magical solution out there?
The recommendation that wages should not rise when we see wages falling further and further behind.
But the reason for that is because wages will increase demand in the economy and be inflationary as well. Right?
The reality is Canadians need to have the wherewithal to put food on the table, and that's where the NDP and where Jagmeet Singh have been focused on, ensuring with the dental credit, ensuring with the rental credit, ensuring with the doubling of the GST rebate, and fighting back against these anti-competitive policies that families can actually have the wherewithal to put food on the table.
And I do get that, but respectfully, I am challenging the economics of it. You are increasing by all of that, including what the Liberals have agreed to do. You are increasing spending, you are increasing demand in the economy. Is it your viewpoint, or is it the NDP's viewpoint that is worth it, even if it does further drive up the cost of living overall?
Well, the fact that the Conservatives have been critical of spending and yet voted for the GST rebate, I think shows the paucity of their argument. That essentially, if we have more money in the pockets of Canadians, these are the ways of doing that, then what we end up doing is providing some relief and, above all, the ability of Canadian families to put food on the table.
I have just a few minutes left, and so I'm gonna kind of do something I don't normally do, and that is switch gears and ask you about the possibility of a recession. Because I think we certainly listened to the finance minister today and the prime minister, who aren't saying the R word, but every economist I interview says it's inevitable, that we could be looking at a recession in this country as soon as the last quarter of this year, though most predictions are for more into 2023. Do you think, Ms. Bendayan, that a recession in Canada is inevitable?
I think we need to be ready, and I think that is what we are doing in the finance team, and the Minister of Finance is certainly, as I said, keeping a close eye on things, which is why also we want to make sure, to your earlier point, that we are fiscally responsible. My Conservative friend pointed to spending. We have the lowest deficit among G7 countries, the lowest debt, and we've put forward a budget that proposes to cut $9 billion from government spending. We are extremely fiscally responsible. We want to maintain that, and we want to also leave room in case there are much rainier days ahead in order to be able to support Canadians.
I mean, respectfully, there is analysis outside analysis that does say that your spending prior to what you're talking about right now was inflationary. You may feel it was justified, but it was a lot of spending, even post-pandemic, right? And a lot of it wasn't temporary, even though it had originally been indicated that it would be.
Economists have also said that we would have been in a much worse economic situation had we not spent that money. In fact, we would have had almost a similar debt level just because of the brakes being put on our economy and us being unable to restart as quickly as we did. And so in the end, we were actually in a much better position because of that spending, which was an emergency spending during the pandemic.
Just very quickly, and I'll get both of you to weigh in too. You didn't really answer it. Do you think a recession is inevitable? You said you're preparing for it, but does that mean the government thinks there will be one?
I think that the geopolitical situation at the moment and the economic instability at the moment doesn't really allow for us to predict with certainty when something like this would happen. And we are seeing the inflation stabilize here in Canada for the moment. And so we are keeping a close watch.
Just part of it with gas, but the rest of it's going up. Ms. Kusie, does your party believe there will be a recession?
I think it is highly probable, Vashi, and that is the reason why we as Conservatives believe that this is the time to keep more money in Canadians' pockets. Right now, the government is set to triple the carbon tax by 2030. We have payroll taxes, which are expected to increase on January 1st, and the cost of gas, food, and home heating expecting to increase on April 1st. This is the time where we need to think ahead to Canadians' wallets and keep more money in their pockets.
I don't have much time, but a quick challenge. They're contributions. They're not just taxes. And also, like I said, the same challenge from before, putting more money in Canadians' pockets could actually make their cost of living higher. Last word to you, Mr. Julian. Is there going to be a recession?
It is likely. And so it's laughable that the Liberals say, well, we're preparing for it, and when they haven't fixed the broken employment insurance system. And we've got the Conservatives even recommending worse. So they want to ensure that the employment insurance system isn't funded. We need to make sure that if Canadians lose their jobs through the recession, that we actually have employment insurance in place. And as we know, most Canadians, workers who lose their jobs don't have access to employment insurance. That has to be fixed. And the government can't say they're preparing if they aren't fixing a very broken employment insurance system.
I feel like that's a whole other discussion we have because I've listened to it in QP. I know the government says they are making considerations there, but the NDP has pointed out that nothing's changing. We'll save that for another debate. I have to leave it there. Thank you very much to all three of you, Rachel Bendayan, Stephanie Kusie, and Peter Julian. Hi, I'm Vashi Capellos, host of Power in Politics. See more of our show by subscribing to the CBC News channel or click the link for another video.